Please like this video. It will really help this story reach as many people as possible. Thank you so much for your support. You thought it was just an affair. You had no idea what you were opening. The first thing I noticed when I pulled into my driveway after 18 months in the Middle East wasn't the overgrown lawn or the peeling paint on the shutters. It was the fact that my 2018 Ford Mustang, my pride and joy, the car I'd spent 3 years restoring, was nowhere to be found. "Welcome home, Nick," I muttered to myself, shouldering my duffel bag. The front door opened before I could reach for my keys. Melissa stood there perfectly put together as always, her blonde hair styled like she'd just left the salon, which, knowing Mel, she probably had. "You're early," she said, not moving to hug me. No smile, no tears of joy. Just that flat statement like I was a delivery she wasn't expecting. Traffic was light. I dropped my bag on the porch. "Where's my car, Mel?" She waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, that old thing. It was just sitting there taking up space." Craig needed reliable transportation for his consulting work, so I let him use it. Craig. I'd heard that name exactly 3 times in our video calls over the past 6 months. Each time, Mel had brushed off my questions about who he was with vague answers about him being a family friend helping out while I was deployed. "You gave away my car to some guy I've never met." "I didn't give it away. He's borrowing it." Mel finally stepped aside to let me in. "God, Nick, you're being dramatic. It's just a car. Just a car." The car I'd bought with my first deployment bonus. The car I'd rebuilt engine by engine, part by part during my leave time. The car that represented every hour I'd worked to build something lasting for our family. I walked into my own house, feeling like a stranger. The furniture had been rearranged. There were new throw pillows on the couch, expensive ones. A massive flat-screen TV dominated the living room wall where my bookshelf used to be. Where are my books? In the garage. We needed the space. Mel was already heading toward the kitchen, her heels clicking on the hardwood. "Tyler's at his friend's house. He'll be back for dinner. At least my 13-year-old son would be happy to see me, maybe." I followed Mel into the kitchen, noting the new espresso machine, the wine rack that definitely hadn't been there before, and the fact that my coffee mug, the one Tyler had made me in art class 3 years ago, was nowhere to be seen. "So, tell me about Craig," I said, keeping my voice level. 18 months in the army had taught me patience, but it had also taught me when to gather intelligence before making a move. "He's been wonderful. Really stepped up when you were gone." Mel opened the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of white wine. Wasn't even noon. "He helped me with the finances, fixed things around the house, kept me company." Kept her company, right? What kind of consulting does he do? Corporate stuff, efficiency analysis. He works with my company sometimes. Mel poured herself a generous glass of wine. She didn't offer me one. "He's very successful." Of course he was. In my experience, the guys who moved in on deployed soldiers' wives were always very successful. At least according to the wives. The front door opened and I heard Tyler's voice. "Mom, I'm back. Is Dad really Dad?" My son appeared in the kitchen doorway taller than I remembered and his brown hair longer, but his grin was exactly the same. He launched himself at me, and for the first time since I'd gotten home, something felt right. "Hey, buddy." I wrapped him in a bear hug. "You grew about a foot while I was gone." Mom said, "You might not make it back until next week." Tyler pulled back to look at me. She said Craig was going to take me to the baseball game this weekend instead. Craig again. I glanced at Mel, who was suddenly very interested in her wine glass. "Well, I'm here now," I said. "We can go to the game together." "Actually," Mel interjected, "Craig already bought the tickets. It would be rude to cancel on him now." Rude to cancel on him. But apparently, it wasn't rude to give away my car or rearrange my house or make plans for my son without consulting me. I was starting to get a clearer picture of what my 18 months of service had cost me. And it wasn't just the missed birthdays and holidays I'd been worried about. That evening, after Tyler went to bed, I sat on my own couch, feeling like a guest in my own home. Mel was upstairs talking on the phone in a low voice. I caught fragments of conversation through the floorboards. He's acting weird about the car. I know, but what was I supposed to do? Craig, you're being paranoid. Craig. She was talking to Craig at 10 o'clock at night. I pulled out my phone and did what any suspicious husband would do in 2023. I Googled him, Craig Dalton, the name Mel had finally given me when I pressed her for details. According to LinkedIn, he was a strategic business consultant with an impressive-sounding company I'd never heard of. His profile picture showed a guy about my age, maybe a little older, with the kind of practice smile that screamed, "Trust me with your wife and your wallet." But something felt off about his profile. The recommendations were generic. His work history had gaps, and for a guy who claimed to be local, he sure had worked in a lot of different cities. I was still staring at his profile when Mel came downstairs. "I'm going to bed," she announced. "I have an early meeting tomorrow with Craig." She paused at the bottom of the stairs, among others. "It's a work thing, Nick. You wouldn't understand, right?" I wouldn't understand because apparently 18 months of managing logistics for a forward operating base hadn't taught me anything about business. After Mel went upstairs, I walked through my house, really looking at it for the first time. In the kitchen, I found receipts shoved in the junk drawer, expensive restaurants, hotels, weekend trips, all dated while I was deployed, all for 2 people. In the garage, I found my books stacked in dusty boxes next to my workbench. My tools were gone. In their place sat a set of golf clubs I'd never seen before. Nice ones. The kind that cost more than most people's monthly rent. But it was the trash can that told the real story. I almost missed it. A crumpled receipt from a jewelry store. Dated 2 weeks ago. A men's watch. $1,500. Mel had never bought me a $1,500 watch. Heck, she'd complained when I'd spent $50 on a new socket set. I smoothed out the receipt and took a picture of it with my phone. Then I put it back in the trash exactly where I'd found it. Upstairs, I could hear Mel moving around in our bedroom. Our bedroom where I apparently no longer had a place to put my clothes, judging by the fact that the closet was completely full of her things and what looked like some men's clothing that definitely wasn't mine. I grabbed a pillow and a blanket from the linen closet and made myself comfortable on the couch. My couch in my house that no longer felt like home. As I lay there staring at the ceiling, I thought about the last 18 months, the long days, the dangerous nights, the constant worry about my family back home. I'd missed Tyler's birthday, our anniversary, Christmas, and God knows how many other important moments. And while I was gone, my wife had been playing house with another man, using my money to buy him gifts, letting him drive my car, making him comfortable in my space. But the thing that bothered me most wasn't the betrayal itself. It was how casually she'd dismissed my concerns. How quickly she'd made it clear that I was the intruder here. Well, Mel had made one crucial mistake. She'd forgotten that the army doesn't just teach you how to follow orders. It teaches you how to plan, how to gather intelligence, and how to execute a mission. And I was starting to think I had a mission. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of voice. In my kitchen. Male and female voices laughing. I checked my watch. 7:30 a.m. Mel usually left for work by 8 o'clock, which meant whoever was in my kitchen was either very early or had spent the night. I pulled on yesterday's clothes and walked into the kitchen to find my wife sharing coffee and what looked like an intimate conversation with a man I'd never seen before. He was about my height, better dressed, with the kind of artificially white teeth that suggested regular dental work. Nick. Mel's voice was too bright, too cheerful. "This is Craig. Craig, this is my husband." Craig stood up and extended his hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Nick, great to finally meet you. Mel's told me so much about you." I shook his hand, noting the expensive watch on his wrist, the same model from the receipt I'd found in the trash. "Funny, she's barely mentioned you." His smile flickered for just a second. "Well, I try to keep a low profile, just here to help out where I can." "Speaking of which," I said, keeping my voice casual, "I'd like my car back." "Your car?" Craig looked genuinely confused. "Oh, the Mustang, right. The thing is, I've got some important client meetings this week, and my car is in the shop. Then rent one. The kitchen went quiet. Mel was staring at me with a look I recognized from our early marriage. The one that said I was being unreasonable. Nick, she said carefully. Craig has been incredibly generous with his time and resources while you were gone. The least we can do is say thank you and give him his walking papers. I turned back to Craig. I appreciate whatever help you provided while I was deployed, but I'm home now. Craig's smile became more strained. Of course, I understand completely. It's just that I've got a presentation tomorrow morning with some very important clients. Then you better figure out your transportation situation today. Tyler appeared in the doorway, backpack slung over his shoulder, clearly picking up on the tension. Dad, everything okay? Everything's fine, buddy. Craig was just leaving. Craig looked at Mel. Some kind of silent communication passing between them. Then he nodded. Right. Well, I should get going anyway. Mel, I'll call you later about that work thing. After he left, Mel turned on me. That was incredibly rude. Was it? In my day, we called it setting boundaries. He's been a good friend to this family, Nick. While you were playing soldier, he was here dealing with real problems. Playing soldier like 18 months in a combat zone was some kind of game. What kind of problems? The furnace broke down in February. The roof started leaking in March. Tyler needed help with his science project. She trailed off. You needed what? Nothing. Forget it. Mel grabbed her purse and keys. I'm late for work. Tyler, your dad will drive you to school. After she left, Tyler and I sat in my car, Craig's car technically, driving toward his middle school. Dad. Tyler's voice was quiet. Are you and Mom getting divorced? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Why would you ask that? Because you slept on the couch last night and you guys were fighting this morning. And he hesitated. And what? Craig's been around a lot. Like a lot. And Mom acts different when he's here. Different how? Tyler shrugged. Happier. I guess she laughs more. She dresses up even when they're just staying home. And she gets mad when I ask too many questions about where they're going or what they're doing. I pulled into the school drop-off line, my mind racing. Tyler, has Craig ever stayed overnight? I don't know. Maybe. His car was in the driveway when I got up a few times. Tyler looked at me with eyes that seemed too old for 13. And Dad, I don't like him. Why not? He's fake. Like he asked me about school and stuff, but he's not really listening. And he goes through our mail. I saw him looking at your army stuff one time, taking pictures of it with his phone. Taking pictures of my military correspondence. That was interesting. Tyler, I need you to do something for me. If Craig comes around when I'm not here, I want you to pay attention to what he does, okay? But don't make it obvious. Just observe. Like spy on him. Like be aware of your surroundings. It's a good life skill. Tyler grinned. Cool. Can I get a code name? Despite everything, I found myself smiling back. How about Eagle Eye? Awesome. What's your code name? I thought about it. How about Dad? After dropping Tyler off, I drove to the address on Craig's LinkedIn profile. It was a small office building in a strip mall, the kind of place that houses insurance agencies and tax preparers. The suite number Craig had listed was a mailbox service. Interesting. I spent the rest of the morning doing what the Army had trained me to do, reconnaissance. I called the company Craig claimed to work for. According to the receptionist, they'd never heard of him. I checked the business registration database. His consulting company had been registered 6 months ago, right around the time he'd started helping Mel. By lunchtime, I had a pretty clear picture forming, and I didn't like what I was seeing. I drove home to find Craig's car, my car, in the driveway. He was supposed to be at those important client meetings, but apparently he'd found time to stop by my house while I was out. I parked on the street and walked around to the backyard. Through the kitchen window, I could see Craig sitting at my table with a laptop open and what looked like financial documents spread out in front of him. My financial documents. I watched him for 10 minutes taking pictures with my phone as he photographed bank statements, insurance papers, and what looked like my deployment pay-ups. He was methodical about it, careful to put everything back exactly where he'd found it. When he finally left, I waited another 20 minutes before going inside. Everything looked normal, but I knew better now. I checked the documents he'd been looking at. Bank statements, tax returns, insurance policies, all the paperwork that would tell someone exactly how much money a deployed soldier had saved up and how it was invested. That evening, Mel came home late with takeout Chinese food and an attitude. "I heard you went by Craig's office today," she said without preamble. "Did I?" "Don't play games, Nick." His building manager called him. Said some guy was asking questions. So Craig had contacts at a building where he didn't actually work. That was either very good preparation or very bad luck. I was in the neighborhood. You were checking up on him. Why can't you just trust me? Trust. That was rich coming from a woman who'd been letting another man go through our financial records while I was deployed. Maybe because my wife's boyfriend was sitting in my kitchen this morning going through my bank statements. Mel went very still. What are you talking about? I saw him Mel through the window taking pictures of our financial documents. That's impossible. Craig was at work all day. No, he wasn't, because Craig doesn't actually work where he says he works. His office is a mailbox service and the company on his LinkedIn profile has never heard of him. For a moment, Mel looked genuinely confused. Then her expression hardened. You're paranoid. Deployment stress or something. Maybe you should talk to someone. Maybe I should. Maybe I should talk to a lawyer. The words hung in the air between us like a threat. Which I suppose they were. Nick. Mel's voice was softer now, more like the woman I'd married. I know this is hard coming home readjusting, but Craig really has been a help. He's got experience with financial planning and he was just trying to make sure we were making smart decisions with your deployment pay without asking me. You were halfway around the world. I had to make decisions like giving him my car. Like accepting help from a friend. Friend, right. That night after Mel went to bed, I sat at my computer and did some research. Craig Dalton had a thin digital footprint for a successful consultant. His social media accounts were recent, his professional references were generic, and his address history showed a pattern of moving every year or two. But the most interesting thing I found was a news article from Denver dated 2 years ago. A woman named Patricia Rise had filed a police report claiming that a man named Craig Dalt had seduced her while her husband was deployed overseas, gained access to their financial information, and disappeared with $20,000 from their joint account. The case had been dropped when Patricia's husband filed for divorce and she became an unreliable witness. But the details were eerily familiar. I printed out the article and added it to a folder I was starting to build, a folder labeled Craig Dalton. 'Cause if Craig thought he could run the same con on in my family that he'd apparently run in Denver, he was about to learn that this particular deployed soldier had come home with more than just PTSD and a bad attitude. He'd come home with a skill set. The next morning, I called my old army buddy, Sam Rahman. Sam had gotten out 2 years before me and was now working as a paralegal for a family law firm in Seattle. More importantly, Sam was the kind of guy who asked good questions and didn't judge the answers. Nick Porter. Sam's voice came through the phone with genuine warmth. I heard you were back stateside. How's civilian life treating you? Like a kick in the teeth. Sam, I need some legal advice. Off the books. Oh. What kind of trouble are we talking about? I gave him the condensed version. The missing car, the mysterious boyfriend, the financial documents, the article from Denver. Sam was quiet for a long moment after I finished. Nick, this sounds like a classic military spouse scam. These guys target deployed soldiers' wives, gain their trust, access their finances, then disappear before the husband comes home. Except I came home early, which means he's probably accelerating his timeline. You need to protect your assets immediately. Can you get to a bank today? I could, and I did. By noon, I'd moved my deployment savings into a new account that only I could access. Changed all my passwords and put fraud alerts on my credit cards. The bank manager, a veteran himself, was sympathetic and efficient. "You'd be surprised how often we see this," he told me. "Military families are targeted because the deployment cycle is predictable and the wives are vulnerable. Smart move getting ahead of it." But when I got home, I found Mel in our bedroom crying over her laptop. "The bank account's frozen," she said without looking up. "I can't access any of our money." "Our money is fine. Your boyfriend's access to our money has been revoked." "Craig isn't my boyfriend." The words came out too loud, too defensive. "Then why are you crying?" "Because he can't get to our bank account anymore." Mel wiped her eyes, smearing her makeup. "Because he was helping me invest your deployment pay. We were going to surprise you with how much we'd grown your savings by taking pictures of my bank statements and insurance policies. He needed to understand our complete financial picture to make the best recommendations." It was a good story. If I hadn't found the article about Patricia Hendris, I might have even believed it. "Mel, I found a news article about Craig from Denver. Want to hear about it?" The color drained from her face. "What article?" I pulled out the printout and read her the relevant details. Deployed husband, vulnerable wife, financial access, $20,000 missing. That's not the same Craig," Mel said weakly. "Same name, same MO, same pattern of behavior. What are the odds?" Mel stood up abruptly. "I don't have to listen to this. You've been gone for 18 months, Nick. 18 months. I was alone, scared, trying to hold everything together while you were playing hero halfway around the world. Craig was here. He helped me. He cared about me. He cared about your bank account. You don't know him like I do." "You're right. I don't know him at all, but I know his type." Mel grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "I'm staying at my sister's tonight. Maybe by tomorrow you'll come to your senses." After she left, I called Sam back. "She's staying at her sister's," I told him. "How bad is this going to get?" "Depends on how deep she's in with this guy. If it's just emotional, you might be able to work it out. If she's been helping him access your finances knowingly," Sam trailed off. "Then what?" "Then you're looking at divorce court and possible criminal charges. Nick, you need to document everything. Every conversation, every financial transaction, every contact she has with this Craig guy. If this goes legal, you'll need evidence." That evening, Tyler came home from school to find me sitting at the kitchen table with a notebook, writing down everything I could remember about Craig's visits, Mel's behavior, and the timeline of events. "Where's Mom?" Tyler asked. "At Aunt Linda's. She'll be back tomorrow." Tyler nodded like this was normal, which broke my heart a little. "Dad, can I tell you something about Craig?" "Always. Last week when you were still overseas, he was here when I got home from school. He was in your office going through your desk. When he saw me, he said he was looking for a pen." But Tyler hesitated. "But what?" "He had your laptop open. And he looked really guilty-like when I get caught playing games instead of doing homework." "My laptop. The one with my military email account, my personal files, my contact information for everyone I'd served with." "Tyler, this is important. Did you see what was on the screen?" "Email, I think, but not regular email. It looked like the kind you use for work with all the security warnings and stuff. My military email account." Craig had been accessing my military email account. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Financial fraud was one thing, but accessing military communications was a federal crime. That night, I called the cybersecurity office at my old base. Master Sergeant Williams was someone I'd worked with for 2 years, and he owed me a favor. "Porter, you son of a witch. How's retirement treating you?" "Like a bad rash, Williams. Listen, I need a favor. Someone may have accessed my military email account from my home computer. Can you check the login logs?" "That's a pretty serious accusation, Nick." "You sure about this?" "Sure enough to risk looking like an idiot if I'm wrong." Williams was quiet for a moment. "Give me your account details. I'll check the logs and call you back." He called back an hour later. "Nick, we've got a problem. Your account was accessed 17 times over the past 6 months. All from your home IP address, but outside your normal usage patterns. Someone was logging in during work hours when you would have been on duty. 17 times. Craig had been reading my military email for 6 months. Williams, I need to report a potential security breach. Already on it. I'm transferring you to OSI. Nick, this is big. If someone's been accessing military communications illegally, especially someone with foreign connections. Foreign connections. The login pattern suggests someone familiar with military email systems but not military protocols. Like they had training but not experience. That's often a flag for foreign intelligence operatives. Foreign intelligence operatives. Craig wasn't just a conman targeting military wives. He was something much worse. After I hung up with OSI, I sat in my kitchen staring at my phone. My wife wasn't just having an affair. She was potentially involved with someone who was stealing military intelligence. And I was the idiot who'd come home early and stumbled into the middle of it. I was still sitting there when Tyler came downstairs for a glass of water. Dad, you okay? You look like someone died. Tyler, remember how I asked you to observe Craig when I wasn't here? Yeah. I need you to be extra careful around him. From now on. Don't be alone with him if you can help it. And if he asks you questions about me, about my work, about anything military related, I want you to tell me immediately. Tyler's eyes widened. Is he a bad guy? I thought about how to answer that. Tyler was 13, old enough to handle some truth, but young enough to need protection. I think he might be, and I think your mom doesn't realize how bad. Are you going to arrest him? I'm going to make sure he can't hurt our family. Tyler nodded solemnly. What do you need me to do? Just be careful and trust me, okay? Whatever happens in the next few days, whatever your mom says, whatever Craig says, I need you to trust that I'm trying to protect you. I trust you, Dad. As Tyler went back upstairs, I made a decision. Craig had made this personal when he targeted my family. He'd made it serious when he'd accessed my military communications, but he'd made it war when he'd put my son in potential danger. And if Craig wanted to play games with the deployed Sodders family, he was about to learn that this particular soldier had come home ready to fight. The next morning, Mel came home with Craig in tow and an attitude that could have cut glass. We need to talk, she announced, standing in my living room like she owned the place. Which legally she did. I agree, I said. Craig, you can wait outside. Actually, Craig is staying. This concerns him, too. I looked at Craig, who had the decency to look uncomfortable. Does it? Because I was under the impression that our marriage was between you and me. Your paranoid accusations affect all of us, Mel shot back. You've been spreading lies about Craig, trying to turn Tyler against him, freezing our bank accounts like some kind of dictator. Our bank accounts are fine. His access to our bank accounts has been revoked. Craig cleared his throat. Nick, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I was only trying to help Mel manage your finances while you were deployed. I never took any money. No, you just photographed all our financial documents and accessed my military email account 17 times. The room went dead silent. Craig's face went pale and Mel looked genuinely shocked. That's impossible, Mel said. Craig doesn't even know your email password. He didn't need it. My laptop was set to auto-login. All he had to do was open it and click. I kept my eyes on Craig. The Office of Special Investigations is very interested in talking to you about those 17 unauthorized accesses to a military email system. Craig stood up abruptly. I think I should go. I think you should, too. In fact, I think you should go far away and not come back. Nick, you're being ridiculous, Mel said, but her voice lacked conviction. Am I? Craig, tell my wife about Patricia Hendricks in Denver. If Craig had looked pale before, now he looked like he was about to pass out. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. Deployed husband, vulnerable wife, financial fraud, $20,000 missing. Ring any bells? That wasn't I never. Craig looked at Mel then back at me. That was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding that resulted in a police report for financial fraud. Mel was staring at Craig like she was seeing him for the first time. Craig, what is he talking about? It's not what it sounds like, Mel. That woman in Denver, she was unstable. Her husband was controlling. I was trying to help her get out of a bad situation, and she misunderstood my intentions by taking $20,000 from her bank account. That was a loan. I was going to pay it back. Like, you were going to pay back whatever you took from our accounts. I never took anything from your accounts. Craig's composure was finally cracking. I was trying to help Mel invest your money, grow your savings. Everything I did was legitimate, including accessing my military email. I never. That wasn't. Craig looked trapped. Tyler saw you, I said quietly on my laptop in my office going through my military communications. My 13-year-old son saw you. Committing a federal crime. Mel sank into a chair. Oh my God, Craig, tell me this isn't true. Craig looked at her, then at me, then back at her. For a moment, I thought he might actually tell the truth. Instead, he ran. He bolted for the front door like his pants were on fire. I let him go. Where was he going to run to? His fake office, his fake consulting company. OSI was already looking for him, and now they had his real name, his car information, and his known associates, including my wife. Mel was crying again. But these weren't the angry tears from yesterday. These were the tears of someone who just realized how badly they'd been played. Nick, I swear to God, I didn't know about any of this. I thought he was just trying to help. Help himself, to our money, and my military intelligence. I never gave him access to your email. I wouldn't even know how. You didn't have to. You gave him access to our house, to my office, to my laptop. That was enough. Mel looked up at me with red swollen eyes. What happens now? Now OSI investigates whether my wife was complicit in a security breach. Now we find out if you're going to be charged as an accessory to espionage. Espionage. Mel's voice cracked. Nick, I'm not a spy. I'm an HR manager from Seattle. I don't even understand half the stuff you did in the Army, but Craig might, and you gave him access to everything he needed to understand it. We were interrupted by the sound of Tyler's school bus. A moment later, my son walked through the front door, took one look at his mother's tear-stained face and my grim expression, and asked, "Did something happen to Craig?" "Craig won't be coming around anymore," I said. Tyler nodded solemnly. Good. I never liked him anyway. That evening, after Mel had gone to bed early with a migraine, and Tyler was doing homework, I got a call from Agent Sarah Mitchell from OSA. "Mr. Porter, we've been trying to locate Craig Dalton for questioning, but he seems to have disappeared. His apartment was cleared out. His car was abandoned at SeaTac Airport and his credit cards haven't been used since this morning. So, he's gone. It appears so, but we're going to need to interview your wife about her relationship with him and any access she may have provided to your military communications. She'll cooperate. I hope so, because if we determine that she knowingly assisted in accessing classified communications, she could be facing federal charges." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen thinking about the past 18 months. While I'd been serving my country, my wife had been unknowingly helping someone steal military intelligence. While I'd been missing my son's childhood, a foreign operative had been playing father figure in my house. But the thing that bothered me most was how easily it had all happened. How quickly Mel had trusted a stranger. How readily she'd given him access to our lives. How completely she'd believed his lies. And how close he'd come to destroying everything I'd worked for. The next morning brought more bad news. Agent Mitchell called to inform me that Craig Dalton wasn't his real name. His fingerprints had been identified as belonging to Dmitry Klov, a suspected Russian intelligence operative who'd been wanted by the FBI for 3 years. "Your wife was in a relationship with a Russian spy," Agent Mitchell said without preamble. I looked across the kitchen at Mel, who was pretending to read the newspaper while obviously listening to my phone call. "How bad is this for my family?" "That depends on what he was able to access and whether your wife was a willing participant or an unwitting asset." Unwitting asset. That was one way to put it. "Agent Mitchell, my wife is many things, but she's not a traitor." She's just trusting. Trusting can be just as dangerous as malicious. Mr. Porter, we'll need to interview her today. After I hung up, Mel looked at me with fear in her eyes. They think I'm a spy. They think you might have helped a spy, which you did. I didn't. No. That's what we're going to have to prove. The interview with OSI took 6 hours. Mel answered every question, provided access to her phone records, her email accounts, her work computer. She submitted to a polygraph test and a background investigation. In the end, Agent Mitchell concluded that Mel had been an unwitting asset, a dupe essentially used by a trained operative to gain access to military intelligence. Your wife is clear of any criminal charges, Agent Mitchell told me privately. But Mr. Porter, the intelligence that Koslov accessed through your email account included deployment schedules, personnel rosters, and operational security protocols. The damage assessment is ongoing, but it's significant. Significant damage to national security caused by my wife's affair with a Russian spy. That night, I sat Tyler down for a conversation I'd never imagined having. Tyler, the man who was staying here, Craig, he wasn't who he said he was. I know, Dad. He was a bad guy. He was a spy, a foreign spy who was using our family to steal military secrets. Tyler's eyes widened. Like in the movies. Like in the movies, but real and very dangerous. Is Mom in trouble? I thought about how to answer that. Legally, Mel was clear. But our marriage, our family, that was a different kind of trouble entirely. Your mom made some mistakes, but she's not going to jail or anything like that. Are you going to get divorced? The question I'd been dreading, the question I didn't have an answer to. I don't know, buddy. Your mom and I have some things to work out. Tyler nodded like this was a reasonable answer. Dad, yeah, I'm glad you came home. Me, too, son. Me, too. But as I tucked Tyler into bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't really come home at all. I'd come back to a house that looked like home, to a family that looked like mine. But everything had been fundamentally changed. My wife had betrayed me with a Russian spy. My son had been exposed to a foreign operative. My military service had been used against my own country. And somewhere out there, Dmitry Koslov was probably laughing about how easy it had all been. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated what a deployed soldier would do to protect his family and his country. And I was just getting started. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.